Alright, so water-based markers. People love them, people hate them. I personally love them. They are a bit tricky. Sometimes they leave streaks and stuff like that. And I thought I would show you how I use them in my coloring books, both water-based markers and fine liners. I think I collected a list of like 10 different techniques. Yeah, let's just get straight into it. So first up, I have a technique that I kind of call scribbling. And first, I'll show you with the fine liners because I think it's easier to see. And I'll show you on this page. So let's see if I can show you. Basically, if you look here, I've just scribbled with different colors of fine liners. And when you look at it from afar, it sort of looks like you've colored everything. And for these designs, like Kirby's designs that are really detailed, it goes quickly and it's fun. So I like doing that. I did the same thing here on the title page over here. You can see, or I hope you can see the scribbles. And when you do the same thing with markers, let me just put this back in. Here we go. Yeah, if you do the same thing with markers, you can get this effect. This is also in Kirby Rosanna's. Let me see if I can focus here. Yeah, so you get sort of this technique, and you can see there's still white space in here in a lot of the places, and it's really fast and fun. So I would encourage everyone to try it. You can also, here's another page where I've used also fine liners. On this page here by Hannah Carlson. Let me just move this. And I've also scribbled, but I've also diluted it with water. And I'll return to diluting it with water later on. But yeah, you can try that as well. You have to check that it's the right paper, otherwise it bleeds. But yeah, I mean, the technique, otherwise the base is the same. It's just, you see, really loose scribbling with fine liners. And you can see here in the shading here that it's really messy and fun and fast. Or like if you look at the candle there. If you look from close up, it looks a bit more messy than it is from afar. The same thing then also is, I think I showed this picture recently. This is also just scribbling. And as I said, or maybe I didn't say, I think I'll do like a color along for each of the techniques. So that you can see this one I also showed recently. And yeah, let's see, I have some more here. This is also, it's a combination of like scribbling with the water-based markers and then also using a pencil on top. So like, some of the spaces here are still, you can see, I leave them white, but some of the spaces I filled in with water-based, with pencils. And also a tip that might come up also is that if you go too dark, you can always use a Posca pen to go over it. Or like here, I used a white gel pen on this flower because it became too dark with the pink I've chosen. And then these... I still haven't looked up what the centers of the flowers are called, but yeah, so white, yellow Posca in here. And then it's also, you can also use scribbling if the design is a bit more messy, like in Karolina Kubikowska. You can also use it on skin, so that's what I've done here. This is just the start of work in progress, but you can see this is just really just blocking out where the shadows should be. I mean, it's or just scribbling them really. So yeah. And then later on, if you want to, you can dilute it. Let's see, here I have another one. This is also, I mean, you can see here in the background, it's really just scribbling. And there's some fine liner and some markers here. And then the same technique also over here with Posca on top. So like just scribbling with Posca to get in highlights. And the last one here I have, yeah, so this is in combination with pencils again. So this is just the scribbling technique, but then smoothed over with pencil. And yeah, this one as well. Now I'm sort of going from the technique I find the simplest, so like the least also hard to do for my hand if my hand hurts, like stuff like that, so I don't need to press, to the more complicated. So this one, number 2, might seem a bit self-explanatory, or like, why am I showing this? But yeah, so basically just adding texture, or if you use another technique, so this is mostly done with pencils and pan pastel, and just some parts are done a bit darker with fine liner. And the same goes for this one here. So just shadows done with water-based markers. And you can see like there, just to get a bit more contrast for some parts. Then you can also use markers to do like texture in shadows. This is a work in progress, so this is not finished yet, but basically you can see here I've used water-based markers to get some texture in the shadows underneath. Here is one that's finished in that same vein. You can see here the water-based markers used as to dot, to get some texture into the whole thing. And here's also like in the shadows, you can see. This one is also diluted with water. So yeah, I always combine everything. This one also has like, you see, texture added with, I think this is Posca, but the same thing goes. And this one as well. You can see here in the shadows there's some water. This is mostly done with watercolor, but then there's extra texture with the markers. And this one as well, you can see here in the bushes there, I've used the water-based markers. And here as well on these leaves to get just some dots, to get some interest. And here is another one. Here I've used it to do fur. Just the dots in the fur kind of make a cool effect, if you ask me. It's not the same as using a pencil. You don't do the strokes, but you can do the strokes as well. I'll show you later. But like this is done with dots. And you can see also here in the leaves, it's also done with small interest things done with water-based markers. So just dotting, and then yeah. Yeah, and this is mostly done with water-based markers. There's some pencil in the background. Then we have another one over here. No, here. This is also fur done in a similar way with the dots. This is water-based markers and pencils in the fur. But yeah, it's a simple cheat to make fur, if you ask me, because I'm not one for doing the individual fur strokes for ages. And yeah, and here's the last one. You can also use it to do moss, or here I've tried to do fur as well, not that successfully, but still. And here's a good picture of moss as well. So this is a work in progress over here, but you can see there on her face I've used dots with the water-based marker to get some texture. So this technique, next technique, is a bit similar to the previous one. It's similar to like dotting in the shadows. I mean, I call it like dot shading, sort of. You can see here, I mean, this is a combination of, or like, I've used the dots to shade the fur, but also you can see in all the shadows, in all the leaves, it's shaded with dots. So, and this is on base of straight color of water-based markers, and then with the darker water-based marker on top. And so that's the only thing I've used on this page, and some glitter gel pen. And in this case instead, the base is done with Inktense or other watercolor pencils. So like there's a base with Inktense, and then the shading on top, you can see the dots there, are done with water-based markers. And yeah, it's really fun. I like doing that. And here I found that this technique is really effective on the Create Space paper, where I at least have difficulty shading with pencils and with other markers. but with this dot technique, I've even done it here on the skin. You can see, oh, the glare. But you can see even on the skin also shaded in the same way, and I like it. And then we have her as well, also done in the same technique. You see the shadows, yeah. And this is a work in progress, but done in the same vein. So it's just a base with alcohol markers and then water-based markers shading on top. I just started there. And I don't like how this is turning out, but that's not relevant to the discussion right now. I've also used it here in this picture in Hanna Karlsson. You can see in the, what are they called? Peacocks. All these scales are shaded with dots. Yeah. All right, so now we are probably at the most obvious technique, but the reason I put it, okay, so basically it's straight coloring with water-based markers and then shading with pencils on top. It's used by many colorists, but the reason why I have it on place number 4 and not further up is because it's actually, if you ask me, quite tricky to get it smooth. But this is one done in that style. You can see here in the background though, I have used the sort of done a gradient with the dot shading, but otherwise it's all straight coloring with markers. And you see you get some texture. I don't know if you can see it on camera. And depending on how you color or how you do the strokes, you can either work with it or against it. Then, I mean, everyone probably, or I guess many people have a book like this where you just straight color without thinking, and that's totally, I mean, that's part of the hobby as well, just to mindlessly color. But I also used it in this book. Let's see, yeah. So here in this picture, it's straight colored. You can see the texture again in the fur, in the leaves and the background. But that doesn't bother me, and I could always go over it with pencil to get it smooth. And then we have another one here. Let's see, come. There we go. And here I've worked with the texture on the wood, for example, so like these strokes downwards to make it look like wood automatically without any pencils on top. It's just the marker that's behaving that way. Then in Millie Merota's book, this also works really nice. I like this to like choose an area. This is not shading, right? It's just choosing which areas to be highlighted and which to be darker. So I guess the whole thing is shaded, but the different parts are not. It's hard to explain, but I mean, you see what I mean, right? It's just the different areas I've chosen to do in different colors. And yeah, and then we have the infamous or the famous basing it with water-based markers, and then going in with pencils on top, and you can get like smooth shading on the leaves. And then in the cat here, I think you can see the first strokes done with pencils and stuff like that. I use it often in Johanna Basford's flowers, so like this wreath is done it that way, and then this one, which I showed recently. And I also use it a lot in Alan Roberts' Beauty of Horror, so this is done in that technique, and this one. And then depending on how hard you press with the pencil, you get either these quite soft shadows or you get harsher shadows. I also in here, this one is done in that technique, so a base with water-based markers and then pencils on top. Here I pressed a bit harder, so you see the shadows are a bit darker, and this one is even more extreme, I think. Yeah, here we go. I love this one. It's so bright. You can see the dot shading in the rabbits, so I haven't colored the whole rabbit, instead I've dot shaded it, and there's some like scribbly shading on the what these are, and in the Yeah, this is actually, I think, some of the shadows are done not with pencils but with water-based markers. So a base with water-based markers and then scribbly shading on top, combined with pencils. And here we have an example as well, apparently, or something. Okay, let's see. Yeah, these birds, a combination of shading with scribbly shading with marker and the pencils. And here you can also see like doing details in markers just to make something of the design pop. Sorry for the lighting. I still haven't figured this out. But yeah, so and here this one as well is a combination of the pencils and markers. Yeah, both of these. This one is probably has some ink dents as well. I'll come to that. All right. All right, so next up, I have, I usually use this in Hannah Carlson books, and I can't really find a good example of it, but I know I've used it a lot of times. It blends in so much with the end result that you can't really see the technique. But basically, in these patterns, for example, I plan to go in, so I've done a base with ink dents, and then I go in with water-based markers in the patterns, just in some of the areas with one color, to just make it seem like you've done the whole pattern, because otherwise it's a lot of patterns. And I have like, this is sort of an example of that. So I've done the whole bird in ink dents first, without sort of ignoring the lines. And then I've gone in with the black to put out some of the patterns to make it look like I've done more than I have. And you can also use, like what I plan to use here is not black, but instead I plan to use like a light brown, so that it will probably become automatically darker in the shadows because the base is darker. So if I use a light water-based marker, it sort of lets the base through. And I think, or I know I've used that technique also on a lot of jewelry. So in this case here on her, there's actually a water-based, what am I saying? An ink dents base here, and then some of the details I brought forward with water-based markers, and then some pencils on top just to get the end result. All right, next up we have, this I actually plan to do a whole video on, but doing a background with water-based markers. So one technique is just to use one color, as I've done here, but you can see what I've done is I've played around with the texture instead of played against it. This is just water-based markers. If you wanted to get it really smooth, you could use pencils on top. But this is just one marker, and just scribbled a lot, so you get this grassy texture sort of. And here we have some more. So this background here, when you look from afar it looks smooth, but then if you look closer you can see that there is some texture in there. I've just, you know, made sure that they don't have some really obvious streaks. This is done in that way as well. There is some shading in here also with pencils in the corners, but otherwise I've let the texture be. And I'm a bit sorry for the lighting. Let's see if I can... well, it is what it is. I'm still a beginner. But yeah, this is also done in that, just one water-based marker. This is as well, but this one has also ink dents and pencils on top. Or actually it has like a gradient from water-based marker to ink dents with pencils on top. And yeah. And then we have, here is a work in progress. I showed this recently. This is usually how it starts out. So it starts out really messy, and then I'll either do another layer over this and go over in the more splotchy bits with another layer of marker, and like do another layer scribbly on top. Yeah, and then we go to the next level. But yeah, so here we have 2 or 3 different water-based markers. You can see here there's no pencils on top in the background. There is on her, but in the background it's just water-based markers. And I have like probably 3 different colors. You can see here it's quite harsh lines sometimes between the two, but you can get this really cool effect. And this one is also done in that style. Let me just put it out of the... See, it has that gradient there. And yeah, you can do that as well. This is, you have to make sure, or if you want, you don't have to do anything, you can do exactly what you want, but like if you want this effect, I make sure to not have straight lines in these splotches, so like scribble a lot. And that goes to every background that's not smoothed over with pencils. This one here is smoothed over with pencils, but it's done in the same, it's done in the same, like first up there's, it's sort of started from this, and then if you go over with pencils you can get this more smooth effect. And this is, her skin is also based with water-based markers, and that's why the color is as it is. Here we also have some examples of that. Yeah, here you can see this is a work in progress, and you can see that gradient effect, I hope. But like there's dark here, and then the border between the two different colors, I've made sure to make like small dots and stuff like that. So, and also you can see here from this border to the white, this really, to sort of make it like it's fading out, but in pixels instead of like in pencil you can feather it out, but here you have to sort of make as if there were less pixels that are colored there. That's how I think of it. And then you can either leave it like that, or you can smooth it over with pencils. And lastly we have this, this is like, yeah, this is a really chaotic background, but you can see like I have all the time I'm playing from the lightest color, and then I go to the next lightest, and then I go to darker. And there's usually, and you just keep everything really messy, so that either so that it's easier to blend in with pencils, or that so that the eye is tricked into thinking when you go far away the pixels sort of do their thing. Next up we have perhaps my favorite technique, water-based markers diluted with water. And you can do it on one-sided even create space paper like this from Carla Magana. You can see it bleeds a lot, and it like, this has some alcohol markers as well. No, I think it's just water-based markers with water. And you can see it bleeds a lot if you don't have the right paper and it crinkles, but you can do it on paper like this as well. And I think I actually got inspired by her to do it. Oh, by the way, all the techniques I'm showing here, I am in no way saying that I developed them. I don't think you can even say that about techniques. Everyone's always thought of something before you. But like, it's just what I use. But yeah, so anyway, what I was saying was you can do it on any kind of paper, but on certain paper it works better, like a dream. So I showed this, my completed coloring book. This is mostly done in that technique. And the cool thing is that like the paper is done that way that these scribbles sort of turn into these blotches when you use water on top. So it really looks like I've used watercolor instead of water-based markers. And so that's one of them, Christine Glorious Inks, Mermaids and Friends book. I don't know about her other ones. This is the only one of her I have. I know it works in The Tiny Black Fox by Ulla Tinell. I love this book. It's actually an art book, but you can see, I mean, it's the same thing. This is just water-based markers diluted with water. Maybe some pencils here and there. This one as well. It's so cute, this coloring book. I love it. I mean, it's not a coloring book, but still. Yeah, and then it worked okay in the Wildwood Soiree. But I mean, this is just something you have to try a bit on your own. I can't guarantee that you have the same edition and stuff like that. But this is also done with that. So like, it looks like watercolor, but it's actually water-based markers diluted with water. And then we have some fails. So this here is a fail. I think I showed this recently as well. Apparently the paper here is not that good with this technique. So yeah. But otherwise you can do the shading like this harshly in the water-based markers and just feather it out with the water. That's if the paper is right. And here we have some more that have worked. I think I'm on number 9 or 10, right? Yeah, okay. So here is this background here. also is water-based marker diluted with water. So I scribbled in the trees and then I diluted it, some parts that I diluted with water, and I went over it with pencils. And it was a bit risky, but it didn't bleed. Here we have another one. This one is also done in that technique. This one is a bit more messy. It's one of my first tries in this technique. But yeah, it's you can see this one bled a lot, but that's okay because this page is like, yeah, it is for that. And then we have, I think I showed this before. So this is, like I said, scribbles and then diluted with water on top, so like water drops. And it did bleed through, but that's okay because this page is sort of a throwaway page anyway. And then here is also, this is actually, well, it's before I got the diluted with water-based marker technique down. But basically I had done this with the, you know, basing everything with water-based markers and then pencils on top. And then I dropped some water drops on the page unintentionally. And they, you know, when you lift it up, it becomes lighter. And so I did it into drops instead. And then I did it all over the page. And then the next stage was that when I did that, it bled through. So I had splotches on this page and I was like, oh no. And so and that's why I'm doing this page in this splotchy kind of thing. It's finished here. Look at that part. Don't look at the other thing. All right, next up we have the, oh, my cat is coming in. Okay, but anyway, next up we have the water-based marker base with Inktense on top. And I showed this quite recently, but still, I didn't find any other examples. It's a bit hard to remember what you've used. But yeah, so this is just a base with water-based marker and then shading with Inktense on top. And it didn't bleed. And yeah, you have to be quite careful with the water if you don't want it to bleed. But yeah, I've used it on this one. This is in progress. But you can see here, this is basically a green and then shading on top with red. And you can see you get this gradient quite easily. If you wanted the same thing with pencil, it's a bit more tricky. Yeah, I use it a lot on Hanna Karlsson's jewelry because I don't feel like sitting there and shading everything with pencil. It takes a lot of time, it's a lot of details, and it's easier to just do it with Inktense. It goes faster. And then we have some examples from here. Let's see. Oh yeah. So here this gradient here is done from water-based marker. Shh, you already got food. From water-based marker and then with Inktense shaded into, and then it's penciled on top of everything. Yeah. Not my best work, this one, but still. I think this one was also shaded with the Inktense. Let's see. And then we have a fail. Or like, not really a fail. It's just, so this was just a quick one. Water-based markers, Inktense on top, and some pencils. Or maybe not even some pencils. Yeah, some pencils are there. But yeah, you can see here it bled through though. So you have to be a bit careful, I guess. But I mean, for me, this is not a problem. I'll just do this in colorful splotches background, and then I'll go over the design with some golden gel pen or something. So I'll work with it. All right, we're in the end game now. This is a technique when I wrote the list, I more or less wrote the last technique is war. So yeah, it's the, if you ask me, it's the most difficult for me to do, at least. There's probably a better way to do everything I'm showing, but it's the end effect is things like this. So let's see if I can show you without the glare. These are both done in that technique, and yeah, I'll show you the stages later on. But I mean, I can't even, I tried to do like how I do this, you know, picture progress. And I mean, it's just, it's chaos. This one is also done in that technique. But yeah, it's basically, water-based markers scribbled really harshly and then pencils on top. But it's really, you have to press a lot, and it's really, for me, difficult. And this is also done in that technique. Don't look at her. But yeah, so it's like you can see the harsh lines there and how I had to struggle with the pencils to make it smooth. And also the background there is really smoothed out, but it's it was war. And then we have my latest finish. Spoilers for this month's finishes, but yeah, I'll show you anyway. These cats were also done in that way. So yeah, you can see all that shine there from the pressing so hard and the burnishing. And here we have one that's started off, and it's easier. This one is probably won't be as hard as this one, for example, because in this one I had to go from black to white, more or less, from black to white, but in different gradients, and that makes it, you have this really harsh lines from really dark color to the lightest color, and that makes it why you have to fight the paper and the whole thing. You have to fight the marker with the pencil. But this one is not from black to white, it's from dark green to white, so it probably won't be that difficult. But there's still this line here to smooth that over and get the smooth gradient effect. That's where the fight is, and that's why it's easier to have like the dot gradients and stuff like that to smooth it over. But this is, yeah, it's in progress, and here this one is also in progress. It's far from finished, but yeah, and so that's the the war. And lastly, just as a bonus technique, or like, you know, when or I always get a bit mad when my white gel pen sort of bleeds the color from underneath. You can actually use that, as I said before, either to make stuff that you want a bit lighter. So like if you, in the example where I colored the flower too dark, and then you go over with white gel pen to make it lighter. Or you can also, in this case, I've used it to do the, I colored the whole building in black and then do the windows in white on top. And yeah, this is a forever whip, but this little part here is finished. That's how it's supposed to look in the end, so like this nighttime windows in white gel pen on top of the black, sort of make them blue in this case. But you can get either green or stuff like that, depending on what black marker you're using. And yeah, that's it. Now, I hope to like do a color along for different techniques I use water-based markers in. But I mean, in the end, the only thing I can say is that how I've come up with this is just experimentation. And you saw some of my fails, and some of them are covered with acrylic paint. You can always cover everything with acrylic paint in case it goes wrong. And yeah, I mean, just, you know, if you got any ideas from this, that's nice. That was the whole intention.